Hi, I'm Magdalena Kaiser, and I'm the Director of Public Relations for VQA Wines of Ontario, also providing education and knowledge on behalf of the Ontario wine industry. So I want to welcome everyone here today for VQA Pinot Noir 1.0. This is part of a 10-part series webinars that we've produced specifically for LCBO staff, and we're excited to have you here again today. VQA Pinot Noir 1.0 is a precursor to Pinot Noir 2.0. So we hope we can welcome you back for that other session. And by now you've probably seen some of the other sessions, Chardonnay, Riesling, and coming up after this will be Cabernet Franc and Gamay Noir. So as you probably know, these sessions are providing you with special insights on food pairings and including food and cheese pairings, and also meeting the makers. So allow me to introduce to you Peter Bodner-Rod. Again, you may have already seen him in the Chardonnay and Riesling session, and we're excited to welcome him back. He's one of Canada's top wine educators, and he is here today with 6 different producers who are going to talk about their Pinot Noir that is available in the LCBO. So Peter, welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you, Magdalena. Very happy to be back talking about Pinot Noir, one of my favorite red grape varieties, and certainly very, very impressed with what we're doing in Ontario. We'll get to these 6 producers shortly, but want to give our viewers a little bit of a precursor story of Pinot before we get to the wines specifically. To kick things off and to get you in the mood, we've got this gorgeous picture of a Pinot Noir vineyard. This is up on the bench, stretching out north and south. You can see the lake in the distance. And beyond that, if you look very closely, the city of Toronto, one of the many beautiful vistas we have in Niagara and Ontario wine country. If you, of course, you're all familiar with the 3 primary appellations of Ontario viticulture, Prince Edward County in the northeast, where Pinot Noir is a very important red grape variety. Niagara Peninsula is smack dab in the middle between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, where we produce a pretty broad range of varieties, but Pinot Noir is certainly one of the important red varieties and certainly growing in terms of production and following. And Lake Erie North Shore to the south and east as we travel a little bit, south and west as we travel a bit towards Windsor, also producing a range of varieties, Pinot Noir among them. When we subdivide those 3 primary appellations into our smaller sub-appellations, we end up with 11. And you might see these terms listed on the labels. As I've mentioned in previous sessions, we've had these since 2006, or the majority of them since 2006. The 10 that fall in the Niagara Peninsula and 1 under Lake Erie North Shore have all been sort of subdivided based on their unique terroir. And when we speak of terroir, we're talking about the climate in each of these places, the soil types, all of the other sort of natural factors that exist in the vineyards that make the style of wines produced in these sub-appellations distinctive and unique and different from any other sub-appellations within the region. And in 2006, these became part of the VQA appellation system. And I always encourage you to take a little at a time to read through the differences between them, and you might be able to guess based on the kinds of descriptions you're seeing here, which varieties would thrive best in each of these appellations, depending on heat and soil types, et cetera. But we're gonna dig into that just a little bit now. Another thing that you might encounter on labels of Ontario VQA wines is the name of a single vineyard. And what does that mean to you? Well, that's typically one that is reserved for at least a mid-tier, if not a premium tier of wines. They tend to be a little bit more expensive. And the reason for that is because they're coming from a very specific space, a very specific place, a unique terroir that is literally a single vineyard. The taste of which is consistent year in, year out, regardless of vintage variation. The terroir, very specific. It might be different from a vineyard that's only a number of mere meters away. And if you know Burgundy, and other famous parts of the wine world, even places like Russian River or Sonoma Coast in California, this idea of single vineyard and specific micro terroirs is very important, especially in the world of Pinot Noir, because Pinot Noir is a great vector to express the taste of place. And so look for those single vineyards, become acquainted with those that are most famous for each of the different grape varieties that we cover in this series, and keep those sort of in your back pocket as recommendations for customers looking for something perhaps a little more up segment, a little bit more specific. What are the three main influences that we have in our wine producing regions of Ontario? Latitude, lakes, and limestone. We've talked about this already. Latitude, of course, we're in the sweet spot. We're right between 41 and 44 degrees north of the equator, just right for all the grape varieties we grow, but in particular, Pinot Noir loves this latitude, loves the conditions that we exposed it to, because we have an adequately long growing season, but not too long growing season. We have overall a temperate growing season, not an overly hot growing season. Unlike famous wine regions further south in the New World, in the Southern Hemisphere, that are generally considered warm to hot growing regions, we're right in the sweet spot for varieties, the varieties we grow. They don't get hyper exposed to heat and dryness in the summer. They get just the right amount, but we have a growing season that's long enough to allow the flavors to develop and the ripening to occur sort of gently, slowly over time. We have the lakes. The glacier-fed lakes are obviously vital, as you all know, to our success. They're what differentiate us, frankly, from a place as close as Hamilton or a place across the border as close as Buffalo. We see the weather systems that we enjoy in these different parts of Southern Ontario, and they on any given day can be very different. And the Niagara Peninsula grows peaches and plums and apricots and pears, et cetera, and grapes, and the others don't, because of this very unique place that we find ourselves, protected by the lakes, the cooling influences and the warming influences of these deep glacier lakes, Lake Ontario in particular, and the slightly shallower Lake Erie to the south. And then we have limestone as our main subsoil, located through many of our wine growing regions. Subsoil coming very close to the surface in some places, a little bit deeper as sort of a bedrock in other places, with a range of topsoils. For example, if you're in Prince Edward County and you are visiting a particular winery, you might notice the vineyards have a kind of mix of clay and sand as the sort of main soil, but a lot of white rocks interspersed throughout that soil. And that's decomposed or sort of fractured limestone that has broken up and sort of been risen to the surface over the millennia. Pinot Noir loves limestone. Limestone loves Pinot Noir. Enough said. So what about Ontario VQA Pinot Noir? Well, Pinot Noir is probably one of those grapes that if you've had it before, you might, some of the words you might use it's a lighter style wine. It's a paler colored wine. It has those sort of beautiful pale ruby, pale garnet hues. It's a little lighter on the palate. It's not quite as strong, let's say, as a Cabernet Sauvignon or even some Cabernet Franc or Syrah. But I don't want that to be all you think about when you think about Pinot Noir, because that's doing a disservice to this grape. One of the great descriptors, and I apologize, I'm not sure if it was Winston Churchill or someone else who was first coined saying this, but one of the things we like to call Pinot Noir is the iron fist in the velvet glove. And what we mean by that is, the wine looks delicate in the glass. We put it in our mouths and we're instantly seduced by the very soft, juicy, forward fruit characteristics. The silkiness of the wine is very, very appealing. And as that wine lingers in our mouths, we find the power building up. We find it's filling our mouths with fruit and earth flavors and the oak influence, if there's been oak used in the production of the wine. The taste of the terroir, of the place that the grape was grown. And when we finally swallow that wine, although we haven't had necessarily a lot of tannins, a lot of drying tannins, we have had a mouthful of wine, a mouthful of flavor, and a mouthful of texture. And I think that's where that expression comes from, is that it may feel like silk in your mouth, especially if you've got a wine that's got a few years of age on it or has been produced in that style to be consumed young and very silky. But it's not short on power as well. They're not all light and delicate wines. There are light, delicate Pinots, and thank goodness there are, because those are beautiful wines to serve lightly chilled, you know, in the summer warmth, to have with light, simple dishes. But we also have Pinot Noir with power and with heft and with richness. And we can find all of those expressions of Pinot Noir in our backyard. I have had Pinot Noir. I'd be lying if I didn't say it was one of my desert island grape varieties. I am a huge fan of Pinot Noir because there's something mysterious about it. You know, it's a very difficult grape to grow and a difficult wine to make. The heartbreak grape, as Matt Kramer once called it. But the fact is that when you get it right, it is something cerebral happens. It really is a spiritual experience. Not to overstate it, but great Pinot Noir can be a real epiphany in the world of wine. And so I hope that you're all drinking lots of Pinot and you're recommending Pinot and you're going in search of those epiphanies and those great bottles that are out there. And there are plenty of them in Ontario. Every year, there's no shortage of those great Pinots being produced. Now, in terms of what type of Pinot we may find at the LCBO, it comes in a number of different forms. Obviously, the first thing you might think of is the dry table wine style, the one I've just described. The iron fist and the velvet glove, that silky beauty that's just redolent of red fruits and plenty of perfume and earthy notes and spice notes, even slightly gamey animal notes in some cases, funky notes. And I love a quote that I once heard from a producer in the southern part of France, and he wasn't talking about Pinot Noir when he said it, but he said, fruit is to wine what disco is to music. And I use that in class all the time. I really love it because I'm a huge music fan. And while I'm old enough to have experienced the disco era and had my bell bottoms and my platform shoes at one time, if that's all I ever had in the world of music, I wouldn't be very happy. And I would say the same about the world of wine. If all I ever get in my glass is fruit from something that's been made from grapes, I'm probably saying, well, good, it's a good start, but I want more. I want some of those funky elements. I want some of those earthy elements. I want some of that wood influence and some of that beautiful winemaking influence, that craftsmanship that comes from the expertise of the winemaker. When I get that, then I feel truly satisfied with the expression that I have in my glass. And Pinot Noir is a great variety that can give us that. And we shouldn't be afraid of it. We should actually crave it and go in search of it because it's certainly one of the pieces that makes the Pinot Noir story so interesting. Besides the dry table wines, we've got really exceptional sparkling wines made from Pinot Noir. Of course, it's one of the three most important noble grapes of the Champagne region and also very important to our production of sparkling wine here in Ontario. That's a segment that has grown in leaps and bounds in the last 10 to 20 years. And every producer, it seems, is making sparkling wine now, making very good sparkling wine. And still, like everything else we produce in VQA Ontario, really great value. Hard pressed to find sparkling wines of this caliber anywhere in the world at the prices that we're charging. Even with the layers of taxation that are on top of the wines, et cetera, they still come to the consumer at very, very reasonable prices. And I feel like you should all be very confident saying that. I don't think your consumers will disagree when they've had a chance to try these wines. If you do in fact come across a VQA Blanc de Noir, then you are talking about a sparkling traditional method wine that has been produced from exclusively black grapes or red grapes. And in many cases, that's exclusively Pinot Noir, although sometimes it may include also Pinot Meunier. There may even be a bit of Gamay used. And then, of course, we've got our standard sparkling wines. They're white in the glass, but they also use, in addition to Chardonnay, some of the red grapes like Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. And then we have beautiful Pinot Noir rosé. We make great rosés in Ontario, and they're not just for summer by the poolside. If you want that light, delicate, pretty summer poolside wine, a rosé, then perhaps Pinot is a good way to go. If you're looking for something a little heftier and a little more rich that you might serve in January, February with a stew that you've made, we have other grape varieties that we grow that we make very exceptional rosés from. And we'll get to that in another session. So when should we serve Pinot Noir? Well, anytime, of course. especially because it's my favorite, you know, and hopefully it's your favorite too. It's great as a wine to serve to friends. You know, I find Pinot Noir is a really good transition wine for people who've been drinking white for a lot of their lives. And they're willing to try a red. They're thinking of moving towards red. They hear about all the health benefits of red, etc. Pinot Noir is a great place to start because it is a little bit on the lighter, more delicate side in some cases, and you would choose that style in order to introduce your friends to Pinot. But we can also get into some of the more robust versions as well. For true red wine lovers who like a mouthful of wine and don't mind a bit of tannin and strong structure, then we do have the more full-bodied Pinot Noirs that we can serve with richer cheeses, with more complex dishes, with stews. You know, although I am a big fan of keeping it simple, for me, the wine is often the sauce on the dish. So I like to have a simple preparation of food, and all of the flavors of the wine I'm serving with that food become the sauce, as it were, become the kind of expanded flavors. So maybe that's beautifully seared or lightly smoked duck breast, or that's a perfect cut of Ontario beef that you just cook very simply with a little salt and pepper and serve with your favorite garnish. In that case, we've got a perfect pairing as well for Pinot Noir. And of course, it loves mushrooms, it loves cheese, and it loves a lot of different cheeses, because what have we just talked about? We've talked about light, simple Pinots, we've talked about rosé, sparkling Pinots, and more full-bodied, more flavorful, more dense, rich Pinots. And just pick a cheese that works to that style. I think a simple rule of thumb is the lighter and more delicate the cheese, the more it melts in your mouth, the more likely it is to be suitable for a sparkling wine or a light, higher acid Pinot. The more intense the flavors of the cheese, typically the older it is, the more aged, the drier it is, the more complex the flavors, then the more full-bodied the Pinot Noir should be, the more robust and intense the Pinot Noir should be. And we've just provided some examples here for you of some pairings that we would certainly encourage you go out and try on your own. So you can recommend these excellent pairings to your customers. So that's our intro. Without further ado, I'd love to get into the tasting and a discussion with our esteemed winemakers and winery representatives who have joined us today. We've got 6 wines to try, and we're going to taste them in this order, starting with KONZELMANN and then INNISKILLIN ROSEHALL Run from Prince Edward County, PELEE Island from none other than PELEE Island, MAGNOTTA, and Henry of Pelham. So we'll kick things off with KONZELMANN. What can I tell you about KONZELMANN? Well, KONZELMANN is one of our truly magnificent wineries on several levels. A very historic facility, a beautiful facility to visit, a wonderful tour program, beautifully situated on the lakeshore, and producing some really distinctive wines with, honestly, the taste of KONZELMANN, I think, is a fair thing to say, because over the many years that they've been producing the wines that they focus on, such as Riesling, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Noir, Merlot, Gewürztraminer, and others, you can go back knowing consistently that you're getting that KONZELMANN, that really exceptional KONZELMANN flavor. And I know that firsthand. I mentioned in a previous session, my father-in-law used to buy KONZELMANN Estate Pinot Noir for me every year at Christmas time, and I built quite an impressive vertical. Unfortunately, my father-in-law is no longer with us, so I'm having to spend my own money on these wines, but I did have an impressive vertical at one time, which of course is all been consumed. But let's hear from Eric from KONZELMANN. Eric Pearson is with us, and he's going to introduce us to the KONZELMANN Lakefront Series Pinot Noir. Eric, welcome.
Thank you very much, and good day to everyone. Yeah, well, I'm excited to talk about our Pinot Noir. And as you know, being at KONZELMANN, Herbert's very German, from Germany. And he originally had a winery just outside of Stuttgart. And of course, one of the staples there is Spätburgunder, which is Pinot Noir. So he's been very animate that, you know, we always have to have a nice Pinot Noir. And, you know, Herbert's a bit more old school, and I love that because, you know, I'm a little bit younger than Herbert, so I bring on a more New World flair in that. So it's nice to work with Herbert on this because, you know, you get the tradition, and then when he isn't looking, I can throw some, you know, curveballs into the mixture and all that, and make a nice, well-rounded Pinot Noir. So Yeah, our Pinot Noir is pretty straightforward. We have nice, delicate fruit. We don't try and over-exaggerate it, over-macerate it. We want to have a nice, easy-going, smooth, velvety wine. We kind of like doing a few different things because usually we get grapes in at different intervals from different vineyard blocks and vineyards and that. So sometimes not all the fermentation is at once. So we'll have a few different batches. So what we like to do is certain batches will try and drive the fermentation for more aromatics or flavor and body or a bit more pigment and structure. And then towards, after it's all fermented, we'll blend that all together and get a nice, well-rounded, medium body wine in that. Herbert's taught me a lot, and he's always been going after, the elegance. He doesn't want anything to be over the top. He wants it to be well-rounded, well-balanced, and I've learned a lot from him in that. And we've been having fun with our Pinot Noir. And, some years, like hopefully this vintage, will go a bit crazy and we'll make a nice big full body over the top, a reserve, family reserve. But always we stick to our everyday Pinot Noir and in tradition in that. It's nice. It's got a little bit of acidity, not too much, 5.2 grams per liter, a slight sweet reserve. So, the tannins and the acidity and everything just come into a nice harmony in that. And we have fun with it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so.
Well, you know what? I had the pleasure of a bottle of this last night with my wife. Two of my favorite foods. My wife's family is originally from, half from Italy and half from the Ukraine. So there's a shortage of pasta, pizza, and pierogies in this house, and cabbage rolls. And honestly, if I was to recommend a Pinot Noir, or in fact, a varietal, to go with all of those dishes, I think this would be a perfect example of it. In fact, I'm so much in love with pasta and pizza that I have them together sometimes, which is definitely not the kind of carbo action that this body needs. But
Yes.
I had a little bit of pizza, homemade, and a little bit of homemade pasta last night, and I enjoyed it with this Pinot. And I'll tell you, that little kiss of residual sugar, the beautiful soft fruit, and the general sort of roundness and accessibility of this wine was just an extraordinary pairing with it. And even with a little bit of spicy sausage that was in the pasta, the Pinot fruit was a beautiful contrast to that. And it was very refreshing. So well done. Really, really enjoyable bottle. And one that I only wish my father-in-law was still here to make sure I was well stocked with his money, not mine, but I'm happy to spend it. Thanks, Eric.
Oh, you're very welcome.
So next we'll go to INNISKILLIN, and we have Bruce Nicholson with us, who's going to talk about the INNISKILLIN Pinot. Again, another magnificent winery with, I think it's fair to say, an ancient history, kicking things off the sort of modern era of the Ontario wine industry, thanks to Don Zeraldo and Carl Kaiser in the early 70s, 74, 75 to be specific. And while, some people may think of INNISKILLIN as the great ice wine producer, I would say that Pinot Noir and many other grape varieties should be spoken in this exact same breath. You look at the history of Pinot Noir and INNISKILLIN, and I remember the joint venture with Jafflin from Burgundy and the Alliance project that happened many years ago. Had the privilege of enjoying those wines. I remember the years of the Founder's Reserve when it came out in that very interesting bottle shape with the beautiful wax top, and how magnificent a wine that was. And I think of all the single vineyard Pinot Noirs, in particular the Montague these days, which are really benchmark products for that grape variety in Ontario. We have a Pinot Noir from INNISKILLIN today, and Bruce, perhaps you can jump in and tell us a little bit about it.
Thanks, Peter. Very good on the history of all the Pinot Noirs here. So that's very impressive.
Thank you.
And thanks for having me here. Really enjoy these sessions. I started my career almost 35 years ago. And as you may know, I spent 20 years in the Okanagan. And Pinot Noir was for me, was a little bit of an afterthought, because where a lot of our vineyards were situated was very in the South Okanagan. It was very hot. And I did a lot of SKUs of Bordeaux varieties. I did Syrah, Shiraz. And so I didn't get to appreciate Pinot Noir until I came to Niagara. And talking to the iconic Carl Kaiser, Magdalena's father, was quite interesting. He, as you say, he was very impressed, and he did a lot of Pinot Noir, and he did it very well. And you named some great examples of the Pinots from INNISKILLIN in the past, and mentioning the Montague Vineyards Pinot Noir, which some of the grapes from the wine that we have in front of us here are from Montague Vineyards. It's not a single vineyard, but there are some grapes in this particular SKU from Montague. And after 13 years in Niagara, I realized that the Pinot Noir is, possibly the most versatile greatest red grape variety in the world. And every year I work with it, I start to realize that even more. We do 3 different SKUs of Pinot Noir. This is our entry-level Niagara State Pinot. Like my predecessor there, when I make this wine, I don't like to over macerate. We don't want a lot of those, some of those bitter tannins. It's a wine that's released fairly early. I only use French oak, and I use it for about 5 months. So it's a fairly early release. What, and also interesting about this is that we do 27,000 cases of this wine. So it's readily available. Some of the my tasting notes that I've made here for this particular wine: cherry, leather, touch of spice, complement the flavors of plum, raspberry, well integrated tannins, and it's a great food wine, which I think is good to be noted here. I had the culinary team give me some food pairings, and they came up with some interesting pairings. Grilled pear roasted mushroom salad, aged cheddar, duck breast, roasted root vegetables. But I also wanted to add that it's a wine that is fantastic for barbecue. I love it. I've had it with ribs, burgers, even pizza here. So those are important. That it's not only for some more of the special dinners that you may have, but also for some simple fare as well. It's also interesting to note this particular wine, not this vintage, but this SKU here, that I personally chose for my nephew's wedding, and it will be the wine of choice for my daughter's wedding, God willing, next year, if we get a little bit back to normal here. So just a few takeaways points about this wine. I think it's great value, and when I talk about great value, I talk about quality and price. It's an easy choice for consumers. It's a great wine if a consumer wants to move from a white to a red. This is Pinot Noir. There's so many great Ontario Pinot Noirs for the consumer that wants to make that move, and it's food friendly. It can be consumed on its own or with food, and it's great either way.
Well, I agree with everything you've said. I love this wine, and I have a long history with it myself. I love that you've mentioned the weddings, because I'll give you one guess what I served at my wedding at Queen's Landing in 1992 to my small entourage of 60 guests. And that was Pinot Noir from INNISKILLIN. I believe, although my memory fails me often these days, that it was a reserve designated Pinot Noir back in 1992. I think it was from the late 80s and 89 bottling, or 90 perhaps. We also served a single vineyard, and I think it was the Choulet Vineyard Chardonnay for the white wine with dinner. Yes. We had the sparkling Meunier from Hillebrand for our reception. So it was a wonderful celebration of marriage, but also a wonderful celebration of great Ontario wines as well. We've got just 30 seconds left together, Bruce, but I wonder if you can explain to me how it is that you can make a wine of this caliber at such a great price? I mean, it's a difficult grape to grow, difficult wine to make. You're even sourcing fruit from one of your most supreme single vineyards. How is that even possible?
You know, it's a good question, because I was asked that question from another wine writer as well. They asked the exact same question. And, you know, first of all, the grapes we get that are managed by our viticulture team, you know, Gerald Close, who's been with the INNISKILLIN and with now Arterra for over 40 years. And we do get fruit from Montague, but we also get fruit from a vineyard you might know, Le Clos, as well. Mm-hmm. There's quite a bit of plantings there, and so I do take a lot of that fruit and I use it for this particular SKU. So two great vineyards, two different viticultural regions, terroir different from both areas, and so it combined it does make a great wine. Yeah.
Well, really enjoying it, and we've had two delicious Pinot Noirs in a row, each of them with their own unique expression. Thanks for making this one part of our tasting today, Bruce.
Great, thank you.
So next we're going to travel a little bit north and a little bit east to Prince Edward County, and we're very, very happy to have Dan Sullivan with us, who's a winemaker and founder of Rosehall Run Vineyards, a place that I have visited on a number of occasions and absolutely love. I don't want to steal your thunder, Dan, but I've got to tell the world that you are responsible for this year's red wine of the year. And it happens to be made from which grape variety? Pinot Noir.
Pinot Noir.
And I know we're not focusing on that one today, but I'm sure the philosophies and the connection between the two is fairly evident in the wine that we're trying. Maybe you can tell us about your Defiant Pinot Noir.
Sure. Thanks, Peter. And great to see you again, by the way. So a very interesting segue from Bruce to me. He mentioned Gerald Close, and it's kind of funny that here I am 20 years in at Rosehall Run, and I'm the new boy amongst this this august group of people. So I think I want to underscore to folks, although we're generally considered a young region, you know, there's a collected wisdom and experience with all the varietals that we do, but in particular Pinot Noir, that transcends multi-generations now. So I think that certainly, you know, as we explore the DNA of Pinot Noir, it's becoming part of our DNA as well. And certainly, you know, Pinot Noir is one of those varietals, as you alluded to, that it can be very challenging to grow and vinify. But I think the payoff is that when it's done and done right, it is one of the most unique and sensational drinking experiences that you can have. And so with our Pinot Noir, the 2019. So let me just clarify for folks, because a number of you are probably familiar with our Defiant brand. This is still the Defiant brand. It's actually now on the back label. I don't know if you can see it there, but we still mention that it is Defiant. And the reason why we originally named it, or I originally named it that, was because of the defiant nature of Pinot Noir. It's relatively thin-skinned. It's a very tight cluster, so it can be prone to rot. So a good part of what goes into a great bottle of Pinot Noir all happens before I even see it. Now, I do happen to see it because I'm walking vineyards, and the core of our Pinot Noir is actually a multi-vineyard blend. The anchor for this is always from a vineyard on the 20 Mile Bench owned by a guy named Bob Nadelko. Bob is fanatical about his vineyard, and has tends the vines extremely lovingly. And so that always is the core focus. I generally vinify that to try and get a little more extraction out of that particular parcel, because it can usually handle it. And then the augmenting vineyards, including my own estate vineyard, depending on the vintage, are made in a little less extracted style to round it out. I think one of the real benefits of having a multi-site product like this is that it lends itself to a little bit more consistency through vintage variations. And so in that sense, I think that sometimes the sum is greater than, how's that go? The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And so like Bruce, our élevage is entirely in French oak. It is for a relatively short period of time, so around 5 to 6 months. And really what we're trying to do is kind of create some layering in the wine and create a little bit of structure and depth to the product, but also trying to kind of grab that genie and stuff it in the bottle. Because as you say, you know, it's always nice to taste a little bit of fruit and wine. And so while I like to have some tertiary sort of undernotes of, you know, maybe what would the French call it, garrigue, or like forest floor, or a little bit of mushroom and that sort of thing, overriding over all of that, what I really want is I really want some red berry character to come out of that wine. So usually, you know, it varies from year to year, and I won't get too specific, but generally, you know, raspberry to cherry to even sometimes a little bit of a cranberry note to the wines. And for me, Pinot Noir is not driven, as everybody's alluded to, by high amounts of tannins. The skins themselves are actually fairly thin, but within those thin skins are actually a number of very, very diverse. And in fact, Pinot Noir has more different flavor components as a grape than almost any other red wine varietal. So it's extremely multidimensional, but there's not a lot of tannin and phenolics generally in the skins. So I think the real trick to making Pinot Noir is trying to balance that extraction of those things without getting too bitter with it. And then the other thing is the pick dates, because what I think all want in this is we all want a reasonable amount of acidity, because that's the component that drives the structure of the wine for me. So so what that does is it supplies the supporting foundation for it. And I think that that's sometimes where that iron fist component in the velvet glove really comes from, is that it's got this really kind of driving, juicy acidity that's a little bit mouth-watering and provides a lot of length on the wine. So while Pinot Noir is generally kind of light to mid-weight, that really deep, long palate impression is evident. And it's across probably every single one of these wines that you're pouring here. You can't fake that. It's either there or not there. You can't make up power. And so to me, that is one of the things that's really alluring about Pinot Noir. And I can tell you that, you know, wines like these, as you had mentioned, you know, you had a vertical of these, and these wines, surprisingly enough, can be fairly age-worthy. Most of these products are generally consumed within 48 hours, probably, of being picked up off the shelf in the LCBO. But you know what, folks? If you really want to try a fairly inexpensive cellar builder, grab a couple of these Pinot Noirs and put them on your shelf for a year or two and just see how they perform for you. I think you'll be really pleasantly surprised that they do have future and they do have evolutionary possibilities to them. And to me, that's one of the really great things about the wines that we grow here in Ontario, is that like other great regions in the world, they have that ability to evolve and change in a positive direction with time. So I won't reiterate all the things that Pinot Noir goes with. You know, Peter, you said it better than I do. But what I will say is, as a red wine is my go-to, this is my kind of wine. I don't find it particularly taxing to drink on its own if I just feel like a glass and I want to shift off of white wine. And I also like Pinot Noir because it is super versatile. So for the very first time, actually, I made a rosé of Pinot Noir from the estate vineyard, and I have made Blanc, well, actually a cuvee of white and Chardonnay and Pinot Noir in our sparkling program. So it's super versatile, and what that also allows for is it allows for you to kind of find the best purpose for the grape depending upon the vintage. And this becomes important when you're managing harvests, simply because of the fact that if you have a lot to get to, sometimes being able to pick some of it for sparkling and spread it out really gets you into the sweet spot when you're going for for your table wine. And what you're really doing is you're picking the tete de cuvee, or the best of the best, to go into the heart or the core of that cuvee. So so I'm grateful for it. It's the most widely planted varietal that we have at Rosehall Run. I planted my first block of Pinot Noir in 2001, so it's in 20th leaf this year. That generally goes into our reserve bottling, but depending on the vintage, my South and West vineyards will find its way into this bottling of Pinot Noir.
Beautiful. Well, you've given us lots to think about, and all of it towards the increased and sort of ongoing love of this fantastic grape variety, Pinot Noir. I'm really enjoying this. I've made a point of using the big glass because I want to allow all of that complex perfume to be released, and it's doing as you said, beautiful red fruits. Some of those tangy fruits, but also even some blood orange, citrus peel, rose hip. It's just gorgeous, Dan. Well done.
Thanks.
Okay, so next we take about the longest drive we possibly can when we're traveling from one Ontario wine region to the other, and that is from Prince Edward County all the way to the South Islands, that beautiful island in Lake Erie called PELEE Island, and we're delighted to be back with PELEE Island, and Daryl McMillan is joining us to talk about his wine. And if you've never been to PELEE Island, I highly recommend you make the trip. It's a unique place in Canada with so many, not just the winery and the extraordinary things they're doing and the range that they're offering, the price points and varietal wise, but the island itself is such a unique microclimate and such a unique terroir. I remember my last visit in the summer seeing the snakes on Lake Erie that literally are swimming across the surface of Lake Erie and thinking, don't see that very often in wine country in Canada. Anyway, Daryl, thanks for coming. I know that behind me on display, I have a slightly different Pinot than you are pouring today, but that's okay. I'm drinking PELEE Island wine with you, maybe just a little bit different, but you can speak to the reserve for our fine LCBO folks.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Peter. And quite an introduction there, and honored to be part of this esteemed group. We do have two generalist Pinot Noirs in our LCBO portfolio, both of which have undergone a recent label change. So it's a good opportunity to refresh everyone on that change and give a quick update. On your right, my left, is the generalist Pinot Noir, which has been in the portfolio for a long time for LCBO. This wine's priced at $14.95, quite widely available, and it's the #1 selling VQA Pinot Noir in the system in LCBO. And the other wine is our Pinot Noir Reserve. It's priced at $17.95, slightly less widely available, but still part of the generalist offering. And as a point of differentiation, the former undergoes no oak aging and is probably in the style that was referred to earlier as sort of that soft, silky, fruity driven style, as opposed to the latter, the Pinot Noir Reserve, which is more of the savory, long finishing, a little bit heavier, more concentrated tannin due to some oak aging with that wine. So the point of differentiation, different strokes for different folks, I suppose. If you're after the wine that you might refrigerate slightly before opening and enjoy with a nice mushroom pizza or a fillet of salmon from the barbecue, this is your wine in all likelihood, nice and soft and accessible. And for something a little bit more savory, maybe an aged cheese or a mushroom risotto dish, it's Pinot Noir Reserve for you. So our history with Pinot Noir dates back to the early 1990s. We had plantings in 92 and 93 of clones 115 and 375 from Dijon in France. These cuttings came directly from Dijon. It's grown quite rapidly, as I mentioned, to now having the #1 selling Pinot in LCBO's VQA assortment, which has been quite exciting to see that growth happen over 30 years. The program, I guess, dates back, like I said, to the early 90s, and the three primary characteristics that Peter had alluded to in his presentation earlier that contribute to the growth of Pinot Noir in our area are certainly first among them the latitude. Located at 41.5 degrees latitude, that added sunshine really does help benefit some of our later ripening grape varietals. Pinot Noir is usually around mid-cycle in harvest, typically right around Thanksgiving weekend is when we bring those grapes in. This year was a little bit of catch up, but it's kind of interesting. We started our harvest in earnest yesterday, and we're quite excited to be cracking into the 2020s, not too far down the road. The second contributing element, of course, being lakes. Lake Erie contributes a little bit of a different effect than Lake Ontario, of course, would for Niagara and Prince Edward County. Our vineyard island vineyard, excuse me, part of the South Islands appellation on PELEE in the middle of Lake Erie is quite exceptional in that we are surrounded 360 degrees by water. PELEE Island, the topography of the island is quite flat, and there are spots on the island where we're actually below lake level. So it's a somewhat remarkable area in terms of the geography of Ontario and in Canada. The third factor, kind of hand in hand with the lake, obviously we get an enormous amount of moderation from Lake Erie well into the fall season. We get that sort of a delayed bud break in the spring because it's extended spring allows for a later bud break, which is a much more stable way to grow Pinot. So typically we bud in line or a little bit behind Niagara, but we catch up, if you will, through the rest of the season and into the fall. The lake offers very much a hot water blanket, sort of hot water bottle, excuse me, effect into the fall, into November and December. The third factor, of course, being the limestone. PELEE Island, basically a shelf left over from the last retreating glacier, is parts of the island are still visible with exposed limestone, but most of the vineyard area that we occupy, particularly with Pinot Noir, is about 15 to 20 feet of soil depth with brookstone clay, or more colloquially, locally known as Toledo clay soil, which offers a great deal of minerality between the soil and that limestone base underneath. Typically, we're harvesting at about 2.5 to 3 tons per acre of Pinot Noir, and at over 70 acres, it's a significant block that we have. Probably the largest single estate of Pinot Noir in Canada, I would have to imagine, which is quite interesting. Lastly, 2 items that I thought we would leave the group with is that PELEE Island Winery just recently achieved status as a Veg Cert, which makes us a vegan certified winery. I think we are among the first to be able to offer that in LCBO, so we are quite excited. Our program dates back to 2017 with all of our VQA wines being vegan friendly, but now we are certified as such. So from this point forward, that accolade will begin to appear on labels. And the other item is that we recently achieved vineyard sustainability status within the Sustainable Winemaking Ontario program. So both the vineyard and winery are both certified.
Wow, fantastic. That's what a great story. I'm due to go back to the island for sure. You didn't mention the snakes, but okay, we'll save that. We'll save that story for another time. Maybe not the last thing we want people to think about when they're thinking about Pinot, although I'm sure they're all very friendly snakes. Really great wine and a great story. Thank you very much, Daryl, for joining us.
Thank you, Peter.
Next, we move back to Niagara and the MAGNOTTA winery. I'm sure you're all very familiar with MAGNOTTA, have been with us since the late 80s, producing an exceptional range of wines, not only price points, but stylistic, you know, home to the Inotrium, the first Amarone or Appassimento dried grape inspired VQA red wine, which has had great success, a wonderful sparkling wine program, and pretty much every white and red grape variety that you can imagine they're offering. The other thing, I think, as a wine business professor, that impresses me about MAGNOTTA is the manner in which they've conducted their business and the exceptional direct-to-consumer emphasis they put on their business from the very early days when Rosetta and Gabe made that decision to go to the consumer with the wines. They've done a really exceptional job of that and have grown their business quite admirably over the many years that they've been in business. So very happy to have another Peter on the call. Peter Rotar is with us, and you're going to talk about your Venture Series Pinot Noir. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for the introduction. Hi, everyone. I just want to say that I'm very happy to be here and present our Venture Pinot Noir. So I've been in this business for about 37 years as a winemaker and at MAGNOTTA for about 22 years now as a senior winemaker. And right from the beginning here at MAGNOTTA, together with the owners and my team, we have focused on bringing the quality of Ontario wines to the highest level. And as you, Peter said, the quality of Ontario wines are very, very, very good now. The level is comparable with any other wines in the world. And we are happy, very happy to achieve that. But for achieving this goal, like we develop very close relationship with the grape growers and Ontario researchers. As a result, we are making over 50 different high quality VQA wines, and we are very proud of each one of them. The Venture series of wines are part of a new generation of wines from our winery, which also is making a positive impact in the health of Canadian. Venture series is Canada's largest collection of permanent philanthropic wines. Each and every bottle of wine from the Venture series supports the new G. Marquis Lyme Disease Research Lab at University of Guelph. We hope wine lovers embrace these wines not only for their 100% Ontario quality, but also to help accelerate breakthroughs in Lyme disease testing and treatments. So this particular 2018 Venture series is a wine coming from grapes from 2 vineyards. One vineyard is our own vineyard in Stone Road, Niagara-on-the-Lake, and another vineyard is one of very, very famous grape grower in Ontario, Wynn's family. So as my colleagues said, like we are very, very well benefiting from the lake effects temperature, where we have cooler nights and warmer days, best conditions to grow Burgundy style grapes, and not only. Both vineyards are using Clone 115, and our own vineyard, we have about 10 acres of Pinot Noir, and the grapes are harvested around end of September, when the perfect balance between the healthy grapes, sugar acidity, and tannins has been achieved. So for harvesting, we're using machine, like we're harvesting by machine from both vineyards. We bring the grapes to the winery, and then we blend them together, and then we carefully ferment them in our rotofermenter. We are using rotofermenter for our high quality wines, where we have the possibility to do a very, very good extraction. And by rotating the grapes, like we program the fermenters in such a thing that we can extract the best quality. Brix at harvest, they are about 22.4, and acidity is about 7.2, a pH 3.25. The fermentation takes place at about 6 to 7 days. We try to keep the temperature about 28 degrees Celsius, and we're using a special type of yeast, which is special for Pinot Noirs. So basically, after we ferment the wine, like we do about 6 to 8 weeks stainless steel aging, where the wine goes through a malolactic fermentation, and right after that, we pump the wine in a brand new French Hungarian oak barrels, where we're doing about 5 to 6 months aging. Now, we're always doing tasting during this aging, because we want to make sure that we don't overdo it. We want to make sure that we preserve what is characteristic, very characteristic for the Pinot Noir, you know, the cherry notes, and we do not overdo it and overcover it with the oak. So prior to bottling, the wine goes to a cold stabilization process to ensure that the proper stability in the wine. This particular 2018 Venture Pinot Noir is a medium full body, wine crafted in the traditional cool climate Burgundian style. Like when we taste this wine, we will feel like very good black cherries on the nose, violets and spice notes with sweet, smoky nuances. Its silky mouthfeel reveals additional aromatics and a long-lasting finish. The wine, I like to pair it like very well with a nice rack of lamb, or it could be with braised game birds or honey mustard ham. So this particular wine, as you guys can see, is about 12.7% alcohol. The acidity is 6 grams per liter, and it's got a nice sweet finish with 7.1 grams. The wine is at $14.95 in LCBO, and we also have another Pinot Noir in LCBO, our G Marquis line, which we are also very proud of. I hope you guys enjoy, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Lovely to taste the wine. I haven't had it in some time, and great to hear the story of philanthropy and charity work that you're doing with the Venture Series. Very admirable, delicious wine, and also very interesting to hear the special techniques you're using. Sometimes, you know, we think of wine and we automatically associate quality wine with everything done by hand, but the fact is, in 2020, if you want a wine of this quality at $14.95, then we have to embrace the extraordinary technology we have access to, techniques such as the modern machine harvesting, rotofermentation, full color in this wine, but still with very balanced tannins. So well done, very good decision making across the board, and I hope that the LCBO customers and salespeople will encourage the sale of this wine for all those reasons.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. All right, so we're going to wrap things up with Daniel Speck, the three great specs of Henry of Pelham Family Estate Winery. Another winery that really forms an extraordinary part of our history, and we're reminded of that history with every bottle that they sell, because they so embrace the history and the story of their family and their family's family and all of the ancestors. And I would say even today, when we think of wineries in Ontario, there are few others that celebrate the family story, as well as the Henry Pelham Winery, and Paul, Matthew, and Daniel. And we have one of the three Speck brothers with us to tell us about the 2019 Pinot Noir, which I also enjoyed quite recently and enjoyed very, very much. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks for having me, Peter. It's funny, what a difference a year can make, you know, given all the insanity of COVID and that. At this exact time last year, I was on if you can believe it, was a 2-week trip, business trip that covered, of course, Niagara and Prince Edward County, Sonoma, Lodi, Napa, Bordeaux, the Languedoc-Roussillon, Burgundy, and then finished up with 4 days in Belgium on a sales mission for our wines. I don't know how I managed that. I got back and slept for about a month. What was exciting while I was there was actually some other Ontario wineries were with me, working in Belgium with a group of importers, actually with our importer and a group of wholesalers, several hundred of them. And the response to the wines was very positive in that, you know, these folks in Northern Europe, they're very used to drinking Pinot Noir from Northeastern Italy, from Burgundy, Alsace, Germany. There's somewhere else I must be missing, but a lot of Northern European Pinot Noir, which is kind of like what we make. We're like a Northern European wine region, but in the New World, which makes us very unique in Ontario. And the response was very positive for the wines. And then when they found out the price, their jaws dropped, because even at $1 to €1 in terms of retail price. So for example, this Pinot Noir sells for about $17. That would sell for about 17 euros, give or take, in Belgium. And so call that $25 Canadian. It's 50% more roughly. And they were shocked at how inexpensive these wines were. And not just mine, but some of my colleagues were with me. And so it's fascinating. I mean, our wines are actually the best value in our own market relative to when we export them. And we now sell in about 20 countries. But when we get to Belgium, which has become a very good market for us, this is now our second best-selling wine after our Baco Noir. So I just find it's interesting, that style that we make, that sort of cool climate, bright, fresh style really shines through. And I was reminded of this the other day. I was looking at some data in the LCBO. The fastest growing grape variety from all countries in the LCBO is Cabernet Sauvignon. All these years later, it still chugs along, Cabernet Sauvignon. But number two is Pinot Noir. And Pinot Noir is doing very, very well. And VQA Pinot Noir from Ontario now represents about 20% of the total sales of Pinot Noir sold in the LCBO, all countries in. And we're growing faster than the category, significantly faster than the category, 4 or 5 points more quickly. So it shows you that, when you hit the mark with something that works really well, that when you're focused on what you do best, it sells well abroad, and it sells even better at home. And I think that's what's really exciting to me about Pinot. I haven't spoken about our wine here, but maybe because we've had a lot of conversation about the quality aspects of Pinot and all the great things that are being done across the province. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about maybe a bigger picture of this grape variety and maybe a world view of it for Ontario.
You know what? Thank you for bringing that part of conversation forward, because to be quite honest with you, I think a region really knows it's starting to nail a variety when we can consistently produce wines of this caliber at these price points. I mean, there's no other way to say it. I mean, we figured out the grape, we figured out the terroir, we figured out the production methods, and we are able to work in these price points. And these are not seen anywhere in the world. I mean, you can't get a half bottle of the worst Pinot Noir in Burgundy for $16.95. Really, and even places like Chile or South Africa or some of the Pinot Noir growing regions of Australia, sort of these new world producing regions, this is starting point for them. And as I said at the very top, I'd be hard pressed to or surprised, let's say, if these wines didn't emerge as the best on the table each and every time we put them down. And you've just sort of reiterated all of those important points. It's time that we all pat ourselves on the back, and it's been this time for some time, because we're doing a heck of a job producing really consistently exceptional wines at remarkable price points. It's so easy to drink Ontario these days.
For sure, and it crosses across a number of varietals, but we definitely see it with Pinot Noir that the Ontario customer is enjoying a good bottle of wine. They get it, they go back and they buy more of it, and they buy it faster than Pinot Noir from other places. It's got its own momentum, and I think people can recommend it with confidence because the numbers show it. I don't know, it's just working. So
yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks for joining us again, Daniel, and for tasting the Pinot with us. Or I was tasting it while you were talking, and I can tell it was delicious. We're going to wrap things up now with Magdalena is going to take us across the line. And thanks to everybody for joining us, and thank you for all your expertise and your inspiration from the producers. Magdalena, over to you to take things home.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. Very excited again to see another amazing session in this series. And I just want to echo your thank yous. So first of all, thank you to you again for hosting another wonderful session. Thank you to all the producers, the insights. I never tire of them. I've been in this industry for so many years, and it's always a pleasure to listen to all of the stories again and again, and they're always different, and every year they get more exciting. And of course, thank you to the LCBO staff for tuning in today for this Pinot Noir session. Your dedication and commitment to education, knowledge, and service is so valuable to our industry. We thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts, truly. And this is really important. Just a few key facts. Again, if you've seen some of these videos, I'm going to be repeating myself, but I guess we can't say it enough, especially in today's environment when people are really looking for local. VQA equals 100%. certified Ontario grown. Even some of my best friends who I went to university with sometimes forget about that. And we just want people to look for VQA because then they know they really are purchasing local. And as we've heard through the stories from today, there are so many efforts that producers are making for sustainability and with different certifications, which is amazing. But VQA itself is really the most sustainable choice for Ontarians. It impacts us in amazing ways economically, agriculturally. You can see on the screen $98.20 for every single bottle of VQA that's purchased. And that number, you know, I never get tired of hearing that number. And then the value proposition. Again, I think what Daniel was just saying and what Peter was just saying about Pinot Noir and what we can produce in Ontario is just amazing. It's outstanding, and we hear it again and again, especially from international visitors who love Pinot Noir and are looking around the world to find great Pinot Noir. And next, I just want to remind everyone, if you have any questions at all about today's products or the wineries, please call Doug Beattie. He is our VQA wine ambassador and is always happy to help anyone with any questions. So thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you in Pinot Noir 2.0 and the other varieties we have coming up.